Now let us talk about a subject that is very close to all of us here, and one which has presented many mysteries to us, but which can be made very clear if you are willing. The Christian revelation is one that concerns individual being. There is no mass demonstration about Christianity. The kingdom of God is within you. It has nothing to do with masses. It has to do with an individual, you. Healing is always an individual experience. It's always rise, pick up your bed, and walk. That's not addressed to a mass. It's addressed to an individual. What did hinder you? That's to an individual, not to a mass. Christianity deals with individual you, individual me. It promises no mass salvation. As the 91st Psalm says, if you dwell in the secret place of the Most High, none of these evils will come nigh your dwelling place, but 1,000 may fall at your left and 10,000 at your right. So does Jesus Christ confirm that when he says, if you abide in me and let my word abide in you, you will bear fruit richly. But if you do not, then he tells you the lack of fruitage that will come into your experience. So it is that we wonder often why we do not receive the healings that we seek, or why they come more slowly than we believe they should. But we do not remember that a healing is the result of a change of consciousness. And we like to think that we can turn for help to God, to Jesus Christ, or to a practitioner or teacher of today, and just stay the same human being today that we were yesterday, and by some kind of a miracle, God's grace is going to descend upon us and make us healthy, wealthy, and wise. And when it doesn't happen, well, I have had letters saying to me, I thought that you claimed that you healed, but I'm not getting any better. I can understand that too. In the Sermon on the Mount, which certainly is understood to be the greatest piece of writing that ever was, we are presented with two ways of life. And we have a choice, so it would seem. Ye have heard it said of old, we might pick out a few of those passages just for unfoldment, to see what happens with these. Or he tells us here in the 5th chapter of Matthew, which is the Sermon on the Mount, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. That's a horrible indictment, because it actually means that if we bring ourselves under the law, we have no right to believe that the Christ will free us. We will fulfill ourselves under the law. Because he says, whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Now, he says, and this is the crux of it. When you think of spiritual healing, think of this. For I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no wise enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees was this: they obeyed the law to the fullest. They really obeyed the law. They did not disobey the law. And if that's the best you can do, it isn't good enough. Because obeying the law is the least of the Christ teaching. Except your righteousness be greater than obeying the law. And now let's see how he defines that. Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill. Whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. So the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees would be this: they would not kill. They would be obedient to that law, and they would not kill. But that isn't enough. That is just enough to be a good Hebrew. That is just good enough to be one of the scribes and Pharisees, one of those who obey the law but who cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Because whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Now witness this difference. If you are in obedience to the law and refrain from murder, you are under the law and you will never be punished for murder. But if that is all you can do, neither will you gain entrance to heaven. For to gain entrance to heaven means to have a state of mind, a state of consciousness that does not fight back, that does not resist evil, that does not set up defenses or pick up the sword. There is the difference between Judaism as it was taught of old, Christianity as it came in later. The Hebrews as a whole were a good people, a righteous people, a law-abiding people, but they could not enter the kingdom of heaven. That same thing applies today. Only today it makes no difference whether it's Hebrew or whether it's Christian, because actually there are no Christian churches. All of whom we have any knowledge, all would be classified as good Hebrews, because in all churches they are taught to obey the law and nothing beyond that. And it is the beyond that that entails spiritual demonstration and spiritual healing. So that even if you never committed murder, never committed adultery, never stole, never did any of those things that are mentioned in the Ten Commandments, you still would gain no entrance into spiritual living, spiritual healing, or spiritual whatever it is that is called heaven, harmony. Now, as you go along, you find therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Now just imagine that if you came to the altar and left your tithe there, and attended the service, and went through all the rites and ceremonies of the church, you still would be nothing more than a good scribe or Pharisee, a good Hebrew. Because until you took the next step, you would not be able to enter the kingdom of heaven. And the next step is described as becoming reconciled to thy brother. Now, of what does that consist? Because again, it has no relationship to going out and saying, do you forgive me or I forgive you? That again is nothing but a ceremony or a rite. To become reconciled to thy brother means to be able to go off in the corner and ask yourself the question, is man mortal or material? Are we dealing with human beings, some good and some bad, or is my brother the Son of God? Do I accept the fact that all being is spiritual, that God is the only Father of this race? Therefore, all of us are brothers in Christ. That is being reconciled. When an individual sits in their own home or in their own church without another soul knowing what is going on in his mind, and becomes reconciled, opens himself to the realization that, not that I'm not bigoted, not that I'm not prejudiced, but I have nothing to be bigoted about or prejudiced about, because there is only one creative principle of life, that is one God, one Father of us all. Therefore, we are united in Him. We live and move and have our being in Him, in what the Master called the household of God, all one family. On the outer plane, we may not be able to mingle with each other that way, for the simple reason that each one fills a place in their own cultural background, social background, commercial background. But that doesn't mean that up here that we are holding each other in bondage to those appearances, but rather that within us we are making the acknowledgement of one. You see, unless we can do that, even though we have obeyed all the laws and been to church and been through all the ceremonies, we cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, as you go through the Sermon on the Mount, we'll come down here just a little way for this example. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now let's admit this, won't you? That it isn't only Brother Shylock who felt that way, but that is the measure of the human race, and that's the code by which the human race lives. You sin and you go to prison if you get caught, regardless of what you do. It's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's always being demanded of us, and we demand of the other. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And that today is interpreted as being impossible to do. Now the question will not arise in this room as to whether or not it is possible to accomplish. There's only one question that will come up here tonight, and that is, there is no other way of entering the kingdom of heaven than achieving it. So if it's so impossible, give up also the belief or possibility of attaining heaven, harmony, or even spiritual healing. Because until we can bring ourselves to that state of consciousness, whether or not we're ever called upon to prove it in life, but to bring ourselves to that state of consciousness in which we can take whatever it is that the human world measures out to us without the desire for revenge or vengeance, without the desire to get back at, without the desire to see even the wrongdoers punished. In other words, ours would have to be the same measure that the Master showed at his capture when Peter took out the sword. Put up thy sword, for those that live by the sword will die by the sword. Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. He did not ask God to punish them, nor did he say, God will punish you, nor did he say, you will get what's coming to you, but, Father, forgive them. Now, yes, I heard that. It isn't easy. Of course it isn't. The Master said that. The Master said it wasn't easy. Few there be that enter. That's how difficult it is. Few there be that enter. But with us, as we are on this spiritual journey, the question doesn't come up whether it's difficult or easy, nor does it come up, will we succeed? Even that question doesn't come up. All that comes up is this true, and can we determine to try it? Now, you know, each one of us is entitled to 490 failures before it counts against him. So there should be no fear in our thought that, well, we can't succeed. We don't have to succeed. All we have to do, and all we're called upon to do, is acknowledge that this is the spiritual mode of life, and that insofar as the grace of God permits, I will live up to that teaching which is embodied under the part that says, I say unto you. The part that says, ye have heard it said of old, that's the part that we have to relinquish. The part that says, but I say unto you, is the part that we accept. Now supposing we do accept it tonight and fall down in trying to live up to it tomorrow. That's only 1 out of 490. 70 times 7 we're going to be forgiven for our failures. So let's not worry about failure. Let's not worry about whether it's impossible to achieve. Let us agree among ourselves, is our aim in life being a good human being and obeying the laws and not being sent to jail and so forth? Or do we have the higher goal of entering the kingdom of heaven? Now, wherever there is a willingness on the part of an individual to be transformed into the image and likeness of God, you will find a receptive consciousness with which to work for spiritual living and spiritual healing. It is the individual who is steeled against any willingness to change from being what he is that gives us the resistance that we often cannot overcome. It is the individual sometimes who is, I don't mean the sinner, oh heavens, If I could only have all sinners to work with, what an easy path I'd have. Oh, how willing the sinners are to give up their sins. How eagerly they reach out to us to help them, to show them the way. But oh, the good man or woman who is so set in believing that they haven't killed anybody and haven't robbed anybody and haven't committed adultery, then why should this happen to me? Oh, no. No. Spiritual living entails a softness, a gentleness, a yielding. There must be a yielding consciousness. There must be a willingness to let go of this idea of he did it to me and I'll do it twice back to him. There must be a yielding from this not understanding the viewpoint of those who are our enemies. Because if they are wrong, our attitude will only settle them more in their wrongness. Whereas the ability to say, Father, forgive them, to bring to them a gentleness, a willingness that they be opened, is the thing that makes room in their very consciousness for a change of mind, a change of heart, a willingness to see. As you follow this, you will find, give to him that asketh of thee. There again, it is not resisting. Here, of course, is the most difficult. Ye have heard that it hath been said, there we are, back of old, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And then he tells you why. That ye may be children of God. Now here we are, we walk around in our metaphysical wisdom, and we declare that we are the children of God. And over again we repeat it, and we hope that by much mouthing of it, it'll come true. But affirmations won't make us the children of God. But praying for our enemies will, forgiving our enemies will, having a softness to this world, a yielding attitude, will make us children of God. Now, it is the children of God that are joint heirs with Christ. And never forget that. And never forget that you are not a child of God, no matter how many affirmations you make, until you begin to fulfill this part of the Sermon on the Mount that has to do with I say unto you. It's a very strange thing that so few people can accept, that this master says, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. It seems strange, according to our human code, that God does not punish sinners. And of course he doesn't mean that sinners go unpunished, because he has earlier revealed how sin is punished. With what measure ye meet, that's the measure that you get back. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. So the punishment is there, but the punishment isn't from God. The punishment is in our own fulfilling of the law of good or the law of evil. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? And isn't it true that the human race, as a rule, does love those who love them? But oh, the difficulty the other way. I had the experience many years ago when I was serving in an organization that was trying to get our government to send food to China and to India. And at that time, the Chinese and the Indians were just falling in the streets and dying of starvation. And at that very time, we were plowing under our crops. We were paying farmers not to raise crops. And here were these people starving, and the only answer we could get from Washington is they're not our friends. Now, that's not unusual. That's not unusual. I have said to groups before this that even humanly we could ensure peace on earth for hundreds of years to come. I'm not speaking now of our spiritual demonstration. That will come. But even humanly, there is a way that would within 24 hours wipe out all possibility of war. You see, in the Middle East, there are over 1 million Muslims in one concentration camp. And they are being supported by the United Nations at the rate of 25 cents per day, which has to cover food, lodging, clothing, education, medical expenses. On the other side, there are somewhat over 250,000 Hebrews who have been thrown out of Algeria and Egypt. And they also are in concentration camps because there's no place for them to go. And they also get 25 cents a day for the same noble purpose. I have traveled in the areas in the Near East and the East, and I've seen numbers totaling into the millions who are living on that same 25 cents a day. And there is where all of the danger of war is coming from. If war comes, it will be between the Jews and the Muslims, or it will be between the Muslims and the Christians, or it will be between the communists and the nationalists. Why? Not so much because of the governments, but because of the people who are starving, the people who are living a whole generation without the chance of going into a schoolroom, without the chance of having adequate clothing on their back, and never once being adequately fed. That's where our breeding places are right now of the danger of war. And I can tell you it would be very difficult to foment a war if all of those people were being taken care of and knew that there was love on earth. Somebody that cared. You wouldn't get them into armies to fight. But this way, they don't need arms and ammunition. Just give them a pocket knife and they'll go to war. And you can't blame them from the standpoint of where they are at the moment. And so it is. When the Master says then, what reward have you if you love those that love you? What reward have you when you send food and clothing and even arms of protection to your own allies and your own friends, for do not even the publicans the same? But, and if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than the others? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And that perfection, I go back again, can only be individual, it can't be collective. Neither you nor I can be responsible for what is done by our governments. We can, to the best of our ability, vote according to our own intelligence, where voting is allowed. But that is not the answer. We cannot force our governments, any of us, to do anything it doesn't want to do. Therefore, we cannot hold ourselves responsible for mass action. But it isn't the government that has driven you and me to the spiritual way of life. It is our individual salvation that concerns us. We are not here to live and move and have our being in spiritual consciousness because of any mass movement. It is because individually you and I have been compelled to seek the spiritual life. So it is that even though we may not be responsible, and as I say, I have served with committees trying to bring about these better conditions and with no success, I know now that that is not our function. Our function is to perform these things to the best of our ability, individually, in groups where possible. There are ways. The first way, of course, is that we acknowledge the rightness of this. Before we acknowledge the rightness of it, we can't act on it. But if we can acknowledge that, yes, I have loved my relatives and my friends, I have made provision for sending my children to school, and possibly even helped out some of our community. But according to this, have I gone far enough? When it dawns on your consciousness that you haven't, and you begin to search yourself, very quickly you will find ways and means, not merely physically or financially, but sometimes only spiritually through prayer, to help set your brother free. Whether you free him of punishment by praying for forgiveness, whether you do no more than become reconciled with your brother inside of yourself and recognize that God's grace must be a universal activity and that it must fall on the just and the unjust, if only we succeed to that extent, we have opened our consciousness for the dawn of spiritual realization, which results in what we call spiritual healing. Consciousness is now open to receive the grace of God, because the healing, the spiritual healing, is an act of grace. It's not the act of a human being. It is an act of grace. But an individual must themselves open their consciousness to receive an act of grace, and the Master has shown us how we can do it. When we have a transformation of consciousness so that we no longer live only by the law, when we're no longer just satisfied that we're not breaking the Ten Commandments and that we are contributing to our community chest or so forth, but when we've gone a step further than all that and become to open ourselves to this spiritual living, and read the Sermon on the Mount, read it 1,000 times until it impresses itself upon you that there are two ways of life. The way the world is living now, the old Hebrew way. You have heard it said of old. Or the new dispensation, which he gave and which has not yet been accepted. That of living according to a divine grace. Living according to a law of love, but not loving your neighbor who is your friend, but loving the neighbor who is also your enemy. Then you'll find that you yourself have opened your own consciousness to grace, because you're reconciling yourself with your brother, you're loving the enemy, is itself an act of grace. And that's what heals. Healing can't come to you from another. Healing has to come to you from within your own being. It has to be you placing your bread upon the waters, and then it's your bread that comes back to you. So that healing means opening and giving, letting flow life, truth, love, forgiveness, justice, mercy. When that happens, an act of grace has been performed by you, and the act of grace heals you. Even Jesus, when he was healing, could do no more than open the consciousness of those who were healed. And they themselves then had to, by some act of acceptance, provide the opportunity for that grace to perform. Stretch forth thine hand. Who could stretch forth a crippled hand? Nobody. So there had to be a release before the hand could be released. What cripple can rise and pick up his bed while he's crippled? No, until the mind is uncrippled, the body's got to remain crippled. And so it is. We have practitioners and we have spiritual teachers on earth today, and they come to us to open our consciousness to this form of life, not to insisting that we can go on being the old Hebrews and have Christian healing, but that we have to open ourselves to a Christian way of life so that the Christian grace can enter. And I don't mean Christian as a religion. You can just well be a Mohammedan or Hindu or Confucianist or Buddhist and have Christian grace, because by Christian I mean only spiritual, divine. You see, it's a strange thing when you're in this work and you come up against the adamant human thought that just is going to be a human being forever, but of course they're going to add a little spiritual healing to it, and then find surprise that it doesn't work. If your spiritual study and your practitioner or your teacher doesn't bring about in you a change of consciousness to where there is a greater love, a greater forgiveness, a greater forbearance, a greater sense of justice, a greater sense of peace, they're not preparing you for a spiritual healing. And if by chance you do have a healing, which often happens through the practitioner's state of grace, and it has resulted in no state of grace or change of consciousness in you, your healing is nothing more or less than having been sick yesterday and well tomorrow, with the possibility of being more sick tomorrow. You see, do not sin again, lest the worst thing come upon you. Do not go back and get angry with your brother. Do not get unforgiving. Do not get unloving. Do not get uncharitable. Do not go back to just fulfilling the law again, because you'll be under the law. But when you come to a spiritual teaching and you read the inspired passages in some of these writings, any of the writers who have written on spiritual things, I don't know how it's possible to be a human being again. I don't know how it's possible to believe that you can come into the atmosphere of these mystics, these who have lived in God and with God and through God, and then draw the conclusion that you can go on being that same kind of a human being and get some of the grace that that person's had whose life testifies to their willingness to live according to I say unto you. So it is that when you come to the next chapter and you read about do not your alms before men to be seen of them, again you have to be reminded of this. God is closer to you than breathing and nearer than hands and feet. If what you do is meant to please men, don't have any idea at all in your mind, unless you want to fool yourself, that your thought is on pleasing God, because it isn't. When you're ready to please God, you don't care whether your brother knows about it or not, or your fellow man. When you are serving God, you're not interested in whether anybody sees it, knows it, or hears about it. You have no interest in what man thinks about you, because at that time your heart and soul and your mind are on fulfilling the demands of God, not of men. How many times have the martyrs been martyred? How many times have they been led to the stake for violating the law? How many times have they been crucified or burned in oil for violating the law? Who cared? The martyrs? No, they broke the law to suit their own convenience. Or they care about the law. They are preaching Christ. And if man gets in their way, man's got to get out of their way. If not, they're willing to pay the penalty for it. But nothing is going to stop them preaching Christ, not even protecting themselves from jail or the stake. So it is that if you catch the vision of the Sermon on the Mount, you will engage in certain philanthropies, But you will come to the realization now that you're not doing it for man or to be seen of men or to be thanked by man, but for the fulfilling of a spiritual law of love. And one thing is sure, that in omnipresence, your heavenly Father that seeth in secret rewardeth openly. So it is with prayers. When we meet here and pray together, which is what our meditations amount to, it's not praying to be seen of men, because we're not here for that type of prayer. We are here, and nor are we praying for anything. We are here for instruction from the Father. Quite a different thing than if we went out of here and then met someplace just for the purpose of praying. Be sure then we would be saying, well, you did that to be seen of men. Here, we're here for instruction. Whatever goes on here is for nobody's glory. Whatever goes on here is merely for our mutual instruction in the things of Christ. But I should hate to go out of this room and conduct a public prayer somewhere. Some of you who have been with me in San Francisco, is there anybody here, may remember how we stopped that thing of praying over collections in public halls. But quickly that was stopped. How nonsensical to get out in a public hall and start praying to God for increased supply. Sad enough to do it in secret without making a mocking spectacle of it in public. Now, the kingdom of God is within you. Here it is, right where I am, right where you are. And if I have to go to God, I have to go within. Or I'm not going to God, I'm going to man. Do I believe the kingdom of God is within me? You know I do. And that is why I'm willing to spend my time in contemplation, meditation, tabernacling with the Father within me, and the Father that seeth and knows whether I'm on the level or not inside rewardeth accordingly. If I'm not, there's no use trying to fool the infinite intelligence of the universe or the divine love of the universe, because what it seeth in secret, that's the measure that comes back. Do you not see now that in establishing, in reconciling yourself with your brother, it isn't necessarily a public act. It is going within to the Father and acknowledging what our wrong is, writing it within ourselves, and then stepping forth in agreement that I must not sin again lest the worst thing come upon me. And even if it weren't going to come upon me, I have no right to go back to positions outgrown. You see, the Christian life is an individual life. There are no rules or regulations. There are no commandments. There is merely the injunction or the reminder that as we sow inside of our own being, the Father that seeth in secret will see that we reap. And our righteousness must exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, because we must find a way of life that conforms to a spiritual standard and not a human standard. But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thine head and wash thy face, that thou appear not unto men to fast. Appear not to fast. How many times I've said, let's keep our business suits on and not wear uniforms, and let's keep our ordinary conversational tones, not this sanctimonious business, not let's pretend to the world how sanctimonious we are, or even try to convince them we are, when the only one we have to convince is the Father within. And there's only one way to convince the Father within, not with words or with thought, but by a mode of life that conforms to the Sermon on the Mount. You see, spiritual healing is a two-way project. A practitioner or teacher on the spiritual path cannot do very much healing if they are living alive, because it isn't the words that a practitioner thinks or speaks or writes that heals. It's the state of consciousness in which they are living on the inside. That is what opens the healing grace. The words in their lips can be lies. The thoughts in their mind can be foul. But when the life is lived inside, then the Father that seeth in secret is there. In other words, then, the healing agency is not words or thoughts. It's a state of consciousness. A state of consciousness that is imbued with a spiritual message and that is seeking, not that it succeeds to any too great an extent, but that is continuously seeking to live above the law of the scribes and the Pharisees. Now that's the one-way part of spiritual healing. The practitioner or the teacher must have come to some measure of living by grace instead of by human modes or means. But the second part is the patient or student. And that doesn't mean that a patient or student will not be healed until they're perfect. No, most of the healing takes place through the practitioner's state of grace. But it does mean this, that there are some things that will not go out except by prayer and fasting, that will not go out until there has been a change of consciousness in the patient or student. But primarily it means that even though you have your healing physically, you have not advanced yourself a bit towards spiritual life until you yourself begin to yield to the spiritual impulses. Now, that doesn't involve asceticism. That doesn't involve not enjoying life. That merely involves what the Sermon on the Mount says, taking this attitude of life which is not out seeking forever to establish its own good, and which is not out fighting the human injustices except by prayer, by forgiveness. It's a change of an inner life more than it is an out. Children respond so easily to spiritual healing because they have not, in most cases, built up that adamant sense of self. Is there a way to achieve some measure of this without the use of willpower and force? And the answer is yes. The answer that we have discovered in the infinite way is this, that from the moment that you accept that there is neither good nor evil in person, thing, or condition, in that moment the inner yielding begins, because you are no longer fighting or opposing person or thing. The very moment that you can meditate. Now follow us in this meditation. There is a spirit in man, Spirit of God. Every individual is in its true being the offspring of a spiritual creator. Every individual is endowed with spiritual qualities and spiritual faculties. Every individual has soul capacities, God qualities. got instincts. Every individual is born in the very image and likeness of God, lives and moves and has its being in God. The good of that individual isn't the good of the individual at all. It's the good of God shining through. Master says, why callest thou me good? There is but one good. So all of the good individuals that I know in the world, they're not good. God is good. And it is God's good that is shining through. There is no evil, for in this entire creation we have just described, there could be no such thing as evil. In all of God's kingdom, there could be no evil. As there could be no good in person, there can be no evil in person. Good is a quality of God, and evil has no qualities. It occupies no space. Again, it's an image in thought. There is no good and there is no evil. Not in person, nor in condition. Evil has no real existence anyhow. That is agreed. Everyone agrees on that. Even in the world of science it is agreed that there is no such thing as a condition of evil. That which appears as evil is a negative or an absence of good. So there's no such thing as an entity or an identity called evil. There is no evil. There is no good. Now, if we use our own old illustration of the hand, here's my hand extended to you, and I sit back here and say to you, it is neither a good hand nor an evil hand, because this hand can't do evil, but it can't do good. The best it can do is be an instrument for me. So of itself, there's no good and there's no evil. And so you can go from your body, through your body, from head to foot, and you will find this, that your body has not a single quality of good or evil in it. It has no power of acting. It is absolutely an instrument given to you for your use. You can use your body in the human sense of both good and evil. You can use it or misuse it. But remember this, that you have to be in that human sense that acknowledges both good and evil. But supposing that you accept this teaching that there is neither good nor evil, now you can't use your body either for good or evil. You can't even use it. Now it goes back to Scripture. Your body is the temple of the living God. Just think what happens in your consciousness in this second when you realize that in abandoning the belief in good and evil, you've made it impossible for you to use your body for good or evil. Now you've left it as an instrument of God, that which it was originally intended to be. Know ye not that your body is the temple of the living God? How can there be any good in it, and how can there be any bad in it? All that can be in it is God government, God life, and it has the age of God. Don't ever forget that. The moment you give up the belief that this hand has evil or good in it, and you then see that the body has neither good nor evil in it, it has no age in it, and it has no youth. Don't forget, all the people who are priding themselves on their youth today are going to be laughing a different tune in a few years. Because as long as there's good and evil in their mind, there will be good and evil in their body, young and old in their body, sickness and health in their body. But don't be concerned because I repeat over and over and over again the story of my hand, the illustration of my hand. Be grateful to be reminded over and over and over again, this hand cannot do good or do evil. I can, but I is God. And because I is God, there is neither good nor evil, There is only God government, whatever that may be. We do not use the body for good. We do not use the body for evil. There is neither good nor evil. There is only God governing itself. And this body is an instrument of God, the temple of the living God. Every bit of this body responds to God's impulse. Not to a good human impulse or a bad human impulse, but to a God impulse. Every speck of this body is receptive and responsive to God's government, God's laws, God's life, God's wisdom, God's love. Everyone leads the monastic life the very moment they agree that nothing good nor evil can enter here, only God. God is in his temple. Hold anything you want in your mind, any object, look right at it, and realize that of itself it can do nothing. Of itself it can't be good or bad. Of itself it can't live or die. Of itself it is nothing but a dead image, and whatever it becomes, you are empowering it. And if you're living in a world of good and evil, you can give it the power to be good, and you can give it the power to be evil. But if you withdraw good and evil, go back into the original Eden, where there was neither good nor evil, and you will find that you have given your body to God. God's government, God's law, God's life, God's wisdom, God's love, and nothing else can operate in or on or through your body. That's accepting spiritual life, spiritual government, spiritual jurisdiction, a spiritual life, a spiritual being, and a spiritual body. Thank you.